My name is Kevin Berger, and I am the author of Atheism is Untenable. On this channel, I don't engage in apologetics. Instead, I apply the principles of polemics and skepticism to atheism and the claims made by atheists. This is justified nonetheless. Please like, share, subscribe, and turn on those notifications.
Tumble on, tumbleweeds. It is often argued that atheism is the null hypothesis. But that's often argued by atheists. So is it true? Is atheism the default null hypothesis? I argue that it's not. I contend that the notion that atheism is the default null hypothesis is either a fundamental misunderstanding of what a null hypothesis is, a deliberate misrepresentation of the same, or a combination of the two. Firstly, in scientific research, the null hypothesis is the claim that the effect being studied does not exist, that there's no relationship between two sets of data or variables being analyzed. If the null hypothesis is true, then any experimentally observed effect is due to chance alone, hence the term null. The null hypothesis isn't applicable to the existence or non-existence of entities. Alternatively, the null hypothesis can be regarded as the status quo, that all things being equal, the tentatively accepted state of affairs remains unchanged. However, in that case, as the majority of the world's population believes that some divine entity does exist, theism is the rightful null hypothesis. At best, the designation of the null hypothesis is arbitrary, as it simply indicates what the experiment is intended to confirm or disconfirm. Now, to be fair, it is reasonable to select atheism as the null hypothesis for the sake of convenience. However, that doesn't make it the default. It's still arbitrary, and to frame it as if it is the default opportunistically creates asymmetry with regard to the burden of proof. For clarification, consider the following syllogism. Premise 1. That which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. Conclusion. Therefore, any proposition P requires evidence to support it. Premise 2. The negation, not P, is a proposition in its own right. Conclusion 2. Therefore, any negation, not P, also requires evidence to support it. Premise 3. Hypotheses are propositional statements. Conclusion 3. Therefore, neither P nor not P can validly be considered the default null hypothesis. As a proof of concept for the syllogism, let P equal there is an even number of gumballs in the jar. Premise 1. That which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. Conclusion 1. Therefore, the proposition there is an even number of gumballs in the jar requires evidence to support it. Premise 2. The negation there is an odd number of gumballs in the jar is a proposition in its own right. Conclusion 2. Therefore, the negation also requires evidence to support it. Premise 3. Hypotheses are propositional statements. Conclusion 3. Therefore, neither there is an even number of gumballs nor its negation there is an odd number of gumballs can validly be considered the default null hypothesis. Now, sure, we can arbitrarily select either even or odd as the null for the sake of testing. However, such a selection is arbitrary. Further, to argue that this is context dependent, if it's understood that the selection of either even or odd is completely arbitrary, to argue that such a selection in some other context, for example, the existence or non-existence of a deity, isn't equally arbitrary, is to commit a special pleading. So no, atheism is not the default null hypothesis. It's only the null hypothesis because atheists have deemed it as such.